God bless you all who are watching from the atheist side and the Christian side. I hope you guys enjoy this one. It's two heavyweights. We all know who Danny is. We all know who PINESAP is. Two great debaters, two passionate debaters. And this is going to be a very good one. The topic is going to be, is homosexuality disordered? That is a very good topic. It's a topic that I'm learning on. I've heard arguments on all sides. So I really do look forward to this discussion. What we're going to do now is we're going to have both fellas introduce each other. And then after they introduce each other, we have a particular format that we agreed upon. And so, Danny, how about you introduce yourself right now? And then we'll go with PINESAP and then we'll rock and roll.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Danny. I have a YouTube channel. I do some stuff on TikTok. I'm interested in philosophy. I usually talk about philosophy, religion stuff, but philosophy in general, issues within philosophy, stuff I like to talk about. So that's typically a lot of my content. Yeah, you can just look me up at TikTok or on YouTube as Danny Phil Talk. Right. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Awesome, awesome. And PINESAP, how about you introduce yourself? This is not the 5-minute opening statement yet. The format is going to be as follows. It's going to be 5 minutes opening statements after PINESAP gives us brief introduction, 1 hour and 20 open minute combo, and then 20 minutes Q&A, and then 5 minutes closing statements. So go ahead, PINESAP, introduce yourself to the world.
Perfect. And just before we start, JP, that Q&A is the audience asking us questions.
Yes.
Correct? Okay, that's what I thought. Just wanted to make sure. So everyone, it's a pleasure to see you today. My name's PINESAP, and I'm a Catholic apologist, mostly focusing on evangelizing the dissident right. But I want to spread the gospel to all people and have all people just love our Lord Jesus Christ and love his church. And so that's my main area of expertise. Also seeing politics through a Catholic lens. If you'd like to follow my content, I'm PINESAP3 on Instagram, Feels Guy 2003 on X, and I am PINESAP on YouTube and Rumble.
All right. So there you have it. So fellas, since this is an open conversation, if does anybody want to volunteer to go first for the first 5 minutes of the opening statement? Or is there any way you guys have it? Because again, this is a bit informal, so it's up to you guys. Or I can just toss a coin or something. It's up to you guys.
I'll defer to PINESAP's preference.
Honestly, I feel like I'm cool with going first, but I feel like a coin toss would be kind of fun. Let's do it.
All right, cool. So let me do a coin toss on Google. So what are you? What are you? You look like a tails kind of guy, Danny. But
yeah. Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Let's share my screen here. All right. So let's flip. All right, let's flip. Boom. And it's flipping, and boom, heads. There you go. All right. So that means that you go first, PINESAP.
You got it. Is that okay if I share my screen for my slides?
Absolutely, you can share your screen. In fact, you'll have all of the screen to yourself. PINESAP, your mic is going in and out just a little bit. Is it just me, Danny? Just a little bit in and out.
I'm fine, but maybe I haven't. Maybe you're so used to good mic quality. Maybe I haven't noticed because
Okay. Well, if it's an issue, chat, let me know. We'll address it accordingly. All right, Danny, I will be moving you backstage, Danny, and PINESAP, I will be moving you backstage.
Awesome. Oh, let's see here. Can everyone see my screen yet?
Yeah, hold on. Let me take care of that.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I just hid my audio. So let's see. Share your screen one more time.
Oh, yes. Let me share my screen one more time.
Okay, let me add that to the scene. Okay. All right. So as soon as you start talking, I will press that 5-minute mark, and then I will give you a 1-minute warning.
Fantastic. So my presentation or my argument is defending human sexuality as laid out by our Lord Jesus Christ. So my argument is as follows. Homosexuality is intrinsically disordered because it does not fulfill the proper end of sexual intercourse, procreative unity. This act is inherently not consistent with the conjugal nature of sex, which can only be shared between a man and a woman in the sacrament of marriage. So my evidence for the nature of human sexuality is as follows. Male and female biology is inherently unitive with one another, and that unity produces offspring that keeps the human race alive and achieves the end of marriage. Children raised in a stable household of a mother and father are more physically, mentally, financially, and spiritually well adjusted than their counterparts that are raised in a dysfunctional or one parent household. Sex outside of marriage is linked to increased rates of STDs, emotional problems.
PINESAP, your mic. Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Your
Is my
mic-
mic going in and out?
Your mic is going in and out. Yes, I stopped.
Okay. Let me check real quick. Let me turn off noise suppression. Is that better?
I won't know until you're talking.
Okay, let me
Read that first point there. That first bullet point. Let's see.
Male and female biology is inherently unitive with one another, and that unity produces offspring that keeps the human race alive.
Perfect.
It's perfect. Okay, so I think it was the noise suppression.
Wait. Oh, I don't know. Give it a shot. I'm gonna press start. I'll stay here, and if it goes off again, then I'll just stop the time. Go ahead.
Oh, gotcha. Let me see real quick. I was just looking. Is it maybe the auto gain control?
I mean, you sound good now. I don't know if.
Okay. Yeah, just stop me if I sound bad. So sex outside of marriage is linked to increased rates of STDs, emotional problems, divorce, and relationship issues compared to the stable union of a man and woman in
PINESAP,
marriage.
you're going off again. PINESAP, maybe just try to use your regular. I mean, the quality will not be as good, but maybe just try using your regular PC mic or your.
I just turned off auto gain control. Does that sound better?
You sound good now, but as you start to read, the voice kind of goes out a little bit.
Okay. Let me see. My only worry is that like this is my computer mic. I don't think it sounds as good.
It's better, bro.
Is it better? Okay.
It's better because there's nothing wrong with it. It works.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay,
Hey,
perfect.
if it works, that's totally okay. Okay, as I was saying. So evidence of a disordered lifestyle pertaining to homosexuality. Anal intercourse harms the delicate mechanism of small muscles that make up the exit-only passage of the anus. With repeated trauma, friction, and stretching, the sphincter loses its tone and its ability to maintain a tight seal, thus leading to the leakage of fecal matter that can become chronic. Oral sodomy is host to all kinds of STDs and contamination due to contact with the mouth with parts of the body that it should not otherwise touch. Even without the presence of the sexual element, romantic love has its end in the telos of the potential for marriage and the procreation produced in that exclusive bond. The nature of homosexuality contradicts the biological and moral character of marriage, and thus it cannot be considered a valid expression of romantic affection. This is only further supported by the promiscuity evidenced by the homosexual lifestyle. In the 6-month period prior to the Obergefell ruling, Gallup found that 7.9% of LGBT adults were in same-sex marriages. That percentage only increased to 9.6% after the first year of the decision, and the rate was the exact same in 2020. Cumulatively, gay men have roughly 20 to 30 lifetime sexual partners compared to the 6 to 8 among men and the 4 to 6 among women, around triple the average of normal people. A study from Vancouver, Canada, of data tabulated between 1987 and 1992 for AIDS-related deaths revealed that male homosexual or bisexual practitioners lost up to 20 years of life expectancy. The study concluded that if 3% of the population studied were gay or bisexual, the probability of a 20-year-old gay or bisexual man living to 65 years was only 32%, compared to 78% for men in general. The damaging effects of cigarette smoking pale in comparison. Cigarette smokers lose on average about 13.5 years of life expectancy. So Danny is going to have to prove the following in order to maintain the thesis that homosexuality is not disordered. he is going to have to show that homosexual intercourse is not harmful to the body or that it is no less harmful than normal sexual intercourse. He will have to demonstrate that the telos or end of sexual intercourse is something other than being consistent with procreative ends, that the homosexual lifestyle isn't harmful to its practitioners, that homosexuality is a valid expression of romantic love, and he is going to have to maintain a consistent approach to sexual ethics that does not lend itself to the promotion of other immoral sexual behaviors. And that is my opening statement.
All right, you have 1 more minute. Anything you want to do with that?
I will give up the rest of my time.
All right, no worries. So I'll be moving you to the back. All right. So, Mr. Danny, I am here in the shadows, but as soon as you start to talk, I will press that 5 minutes. Is there anything you'd like to share?
Oh no. So I'm not gonna do it.
I know, not your style. All right. I'll give you a 1 minute warning, and I'll start your time as soon as you start speaking.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess I'll be brief, and I'll try to resist the habit of responding to an opening statement. Right? I don't think the opening statement is meant to respond to some other opening statement. So I'll just give my view. My view is that generally, if I don't really see a reason for why it should be prevented, then it's at least permissible. It's fine to say that people can do that. It's an optional sort of thing. It might be that in some cases, for some people, it's the wrong thing to do to engage in homosexuality or marry someone of the same sex. It might be that, but in my opinion, that's going to be very personal to them. It's going to be something that they decide. There are going to be people that think that's the right thing for them. For me, it's not an issue that I would place too much overall judgment on, as I don't really see any particular reasons for why I should stop them or discourage them. As far as the actual debate prompt that homosexuality, is it disordered? I don't accept that it's disordered, but mostly because I don't even know what disordered means in this context. I mean, there's different. I can guess as to different senses of disordered. One sense of is a kind of moral disorder, in which case, that's if I don't see a moral reason to prevent it, then I find it morally permissible. Disordered could mean in some, you could talk about disordered in terms of what Aristotle and maybe Aquinas thought about as some kind of natural teleology that entities have these functions, these teloses, is not exactly understood in terms of scientific outcomes or anything like that, but it's just this kind of like extra, like sui generis property, one of a kind property. I am sort of lost on what that's supposed to mean. I mean, presumably that's his view. Presumably he takes some kind of a Thomistic / Aristotelian view of end and telos. I find that to be somewhat gibberish. Maybe he can explain what that's supposed to mean. Disordered could mean something tied to something more descriptive, like in an evolutionary context. But as far as I'm aware, there's not very good data to show that homosexuality and homosexual inclinations and actions are in the purview of evolutionary mechanisms. Seems like there's a very strong sociological component. So it gets in the realm of evolutionary psychology, which is kind of a hairy sort of subject. And as far as I know, there's no studies or very good data to suggest that anyone should believe that it's evolutionarily disordered, right? But I'm pretty sure that the sense of disorder being used there is not one that is in the purview of the sciences, right? That's my opening statement.
All right, Danny, you have 2 more minutes. Anything you want to do with that time?
Nope, I yield the rest of my time.
Okay. All right. So let's see here. I'm echoing, so let me fix that. Okay, let's see. All right. So I'm echoing, but hopefully I'm not echoing. If I mute myself, I'm going to mute myself and you guys talk. Okay, go ahead. Test. Just say test.
Perfect. Test.
Danny, you're echoing, brother. There's some setting you got to say. So yeah, so see? Oh, it's not you.
Oh, is it
I muted
me?
my mic.
Okay. Mute yourself, PINESAP.
You got it.
All right. Danny, is it you? Is it me? No, it's not us. So PINESAP, you're echoing on your end. Maybe if you have YouTube
So
playing.
now I'm unmuted.
Okay.
So is that?
Let me see.
I do hear an echo.
PINESAP, if you have
I
some
turned on
earphones,
echo cancellation. Is that better?
mic check. Mic check.
So I'm gonna mute right now.
No, we're good. It's good. It's good now. It's good.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, it's good now. Okay.
All right, fellas. So I'm going to allow you guys to go ahead. You guys have an hour and 20 minutes to get to the conversation. Again, if I'm not needed here, I mean, both of you guys are adults, so I don't think.
Of course.
Yeah, so I'm going to remove myself from the screen, and you guys have at it for an hour and 20 minutes. If I have to jump in, I'll jump in. But let's get it going. I'm going to remove myself now, hide my camera. You guys should be able to hear me now. And you guys go ahead, have at it. As soon as one of you guys talk, I will press the time. In an hour and 20 minutes, I will come back and we will do 20 minutes Q&A, then 5-minute closing statements. Go ahead, fellas.
Perfect. That sounds great. How are you doing today, Danny?
I'm doing just fine. Did you want to start, or did you? I wrote some stuff down, or did you want to start?
Sure. I just wanted to start with a question just to get a full flesh out of your view. This isn't even like a gotcha, but what would you say is like your ethical principle in regards to the morality of sex?
I'm what you call a moral particularist, right? So I think that that morality, or what we ought or ought not do, the good, is sort of very particularized to a situation or context. And we're often in our experiences, we often find ourselves in very similar contexts. And so I think this is sort of a psychological explanation as to why we lean towards principles. But my issues with principles, or absolute principles, is that you can always think of a context where there's some other value that kind of weighs more than the principle that you're taking. But generally speaking, right, all else being equal, I think that sex should be between adults, right? I don't think, I think that it'd be consensual. I think that the totality of benefits should, generally outweigh the bad things, right? The potential negative outcomes. And we could start something like that. We can start somewhere like that if you want.
Oh yeah, that's perfect. Well, I'm kind of curious, what questions do you have for me, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. So some of this stuff, well, there's a question about what proper end means, inherently not consistent. Those sorts of normative language about, disordered, ordered, right? Some of that is lost on me in terms of what that means. So we could talk about that. Also, it seems like a lot of what you had issues with some of the sexual practices, like anal intercourse, which is actually, there's probably more heterosexual anal intercourse than there's homosexual intercourse. But of course, that might be attributed to the fact that they're more heterosexuals. But it seems like anal intercourse isn't, quote, I guess I could use this word, sort of intrinsic or inherent in amongst homosexuals, right? Anal intercourse seems to be, if it's wrong, I think that's not going to be exclusive to a homosexual relationship. There might, you might have listed other practices there that, that I would think of the same thing, but I don't know where you want to start.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say in regards to sort of the particularities of, homosexual intercourse is that really none of the behaviors that define homosexuality as an orientation in terms of that sexual intercourse are ordered to the end or the telos of sex, which is what I would call procreative unity. Now, what do I mean by that? Procreative unity results in the capacity, or at least the consistent striving for procreation that can only happen naturally between a man and a woman. And so in principle, that always exists within the union and bond of a man and a woman. Whereas in principle, for a homosexual relationship, regardless of what form of sex they might engage in, it doesn't exist. And so inherently, that is why homosexual relationships do not create that kind of procreative unity that I think defines sexual morality.
Okay, so to make sure I understand your view, are you saying that if a practice doesn't fulfill an end, especially in the context of sexual ethics, then it's wrong. Is that your sort of inference, or are you saying something different?
I would say consistent with that end. And the reason I use the term consistent is because, for instance, you could have sexual intercourse with your wife or a wife with her husband and not have a resulting pregnancy, but the fact that they are striving towards that procreative end without introducing something like contraception, whether it's hormonal birth control, whether it's condoms or I'm trying to think of the other forms off the top of my head, but any of those kind of contraceptive elements to disrupt that natural process, that striving after the procreative act is what makes sex moral or immoral.
Okay, so it sounds like you're saying, I mean, what makes a particular action wrong on your view? Is it the telos or is it something else?
Well, in regards to sexual ethics, I would say it's the telos. In regards to other moral acts, I would still say the telos, but of course, not all moral acts are necessarily the same. Like when you get into the ethics of like killing, for instance, right? Like, for instance, murdering someone undoubtedly is wrong because the situation is that this is an innocent person that you're robbing them of their life. But if you were to do so in an act of self-defense, or you were to do so in an act of war, like defending your country, that would not be intrinsically immoral.
Okay, but at least within the confines, you might think that there's other things that make an action right and wrong outside of telos when we're not talking about sexuality. That's fine, but our debate is confined to sexuality. But am I understanding you correctly that if an action is within sexual ethics, sexuality, and a sexual act is wrong insofar as that you're not striving for that end?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so just to clarify, a sexual act is wrong if you're not striving towards the end of procreation. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so if you have a sterile couple, would you say that when they engage in sexual, let's say heterosexual married couple, would you say that when they have sex that they're striving for procreation if they know they're sterile?
Yes, I would, because if somebody knew that they were sterile, this kind of gets into Catholic marital sexual ethics, but if someone knew that they were sterile and they were kind of using it as a form of like natural contraception, I think that there could be a case there for it being immoral if they knew that they were sterile, and they were deliberately like trying to essentially use it as like a normal form of contraception. But if someone was trying to consistently carry out the marital act, right, and maybe they didn't know that they were sterile or what have you, but they were still striving after that end, no, that would not be immoral, because all the constitutive elements of the nature of the sexual act are still there, and they're not introducing a foreign substance or object to try and disrupt that process in order to make that sexual act contraceptive.
Okay, so in the case where they don't know, right, they're still striving and they're not doing anything wrong. But in the case where they do know, right, that if they're not striving for procreation and they do know that they're in fact sterile, and presumably they think if they're sterile that it's impossible, epistemically impossible for them to get pregnant, right, then you would say that was wrong.
I would say it's wrong if you are using your spouse as basically, and I'm only being vulgar here to underscore the point, but if I'm using my spouse basically as like a sex doll, right? Like I'm using my spouse as just a means to kind of get my rocks off, rather than, again, that unity that is only achieved through striving after the procreative act, I would say that's immoral because I'm not caring about my wife in that situation. Only if it was established that, like, to give kind of context on this particular situation, let's say I married a woman deliberately for the sake that I knew she was sterile, I knew that we wouldn't have kids, and thus by me marrying her, I was trying to use this as sort of a loophole for getting out of the responsibility that comes with procreative sex. I would say that's intrinsically immoral, because then I don't have any real regard for the person, the one flesh that I am being bound to in the sacrament of marriage. I'm just sort of using my wife as a sexual object at that point, even if she derives pleasure from it.
All right, but what about in the case of so I'm married, right, and we want to have kids eventually, and suppose we find out that I'm sterile and it's physically impossible for me to have children. So because we love each other very much, and we take care of each other, and we enjoy sex, and so we have sex, but we don't strive to procreate because it's got to be epistemically possible, right, for me to think that to try to do it. But you would say that if we decide to engage in sexual relations because we love each other and it's something that increases. Sorry, my camera went crazy.
Oh no, that's fine.
Yeah. We love each other and it's something that we bond over, that act, then you would say that's immoral.
So if so you said it was epistemically possible in that situation.
It's got to be
impossible.
It's got to be epistemically possible for me to think that I should do it or that I want to do it or to strive for it, right? But because it's physically, if I think that it's physically impossible, then I'm not going to form the view that I'm striving for procreation because I'm only going to strive for things that I think are possible.
Right. I would say at that point that I would consider the proper role for a couple to take being chastity. And the reason I say that is because at that point, what you're doing is you're again using each other for sexual pleasure rather than the striving process. No, with some kind of idea that there might be a procreative aspect in that unitive bond achieved by the conjugal act being present, right? So if I was trying to, for instance, have a kid, right, and I just kept failing and failing and failing, really, really trying, there's nothing immoral about that. But if I know that I'm sterile and I'm using that as sort of like a natural contraceptive method, then that's when it becomes immoral.
All right. So would you say that the average 70-year-old couple is sterile?
I think at some point they would kind of reach a point of sterility.
All right.
Yes.
Do you think it's wrong for those 70-year-olds to have sex, to bond, and because they love each other?
I think it would be immoral if the focus was to try and just derive pleasure from one another. Yes.
But I'm not saying, because that sounds a little bit hedonistic, right? I'm saying that it's an activity, right? Like going bowling, watching a movie together, having sex, right? They bond over it. So if you had an elderly, are you saying that old people ought not to have sex? Any old people that are sterile, right? It seems like on your moral view, they are doing something wrong when they have sex.
Well, what I would say is that if there is an understanding that they are sterile and that there is not that openness to life when they do have sex, and it's not merely like an accidental element, such as like, you're having sex with your wife at like the lowest point of her fertility cycle or what have you, I would say that there is a presence of immorality there because it's all about the intentionality of the heart, right? If I am deliberately trying to get out of the sort of procreative responsibility that comes with sex, then I think the overall, again, almost end of your heart at that point is something that is immoral, right? Because even though there might be a bond achieved there, that bond that you're seeking to achieve is disordered because you're not opening yourself to kind of the fulfillment of marriage, which is in that procreative act, or rather striving for that procreative act.
Okay, so in the Bible, Abraham and, am I correct? Is it Sarah? It's been a while since I've read.
I believe so. Abraham and Sarah.
Right. So Sarah thought before she was approached that she was infertile, right? That she was too old to have children. And so do you think that when Abraham had sex with Sarah, knowing that they were too old to have children, right, that they were doing something immoral?
I don't think his intention was to use Sarah for his own sexual pleasure.
Yeah, you see, I don't think I'm adding that, right? I'm not saying, I'm not asking, when they have sex and when Abraham has sex with Sarah to just use her as a doll, right? The point is that people often have sex, not to procreate, and not to just merely use each other as tools, but to bond. And it's because they love each other, right? And maybe you and I might even agree that, you shouldn't objectify even your spouse, right? But the point is that there's reasons to have sex, whether you think those are good or bad reasons, outside of procreating, outside of using each other as sex toys, right? It's to bond and love. And so if Abraham love Sarah, and then they bond through the act of sex, right? Since they believe that they were too old to conceive, right? On your view, they're doing something wrong, and I think that that's a reductio ad absurdum.
No, not at all, because the unitive aspect has to tie in with the procreative aspect. It can't be divorced from it. So that's why I use the term procreative unity, right? So the unitive aspect is also an element of marriage, but it has to be pertinent to that openness to life. If it's not pertinent to that openness to life, there isn't sort of the giving of oneself to another in order to achieve or fulfill that end of marriage. Because when we reduce merely the act of sex to sexual pleasure, it's then rather feeding our desire, and we more become essentially, we are basing our sexual ethic on, does this fulfill my appetite? Does this fulfill sort of the appetite I have for the flesh? And I think that's a very slippery slope when we start moving down that way, because then I could very much say, well, I love my wife, so I want to commit oral sodomy with her. Or I love my wife and I want to commit anal sodomy with her, and I feel closer to her because we're doing this act together. However, by ripping out the end of marriage, that procreative end that really only achieves the true unitive aspect, right? That openness or that striving after, it is a collapse of the sort of sex act into just like scratching an itch, even if we try to attach these accidental elements of like love or what have you to it.
Okay. I'm not so sure I understood all of that, but I did understand a little bit of what you said at the end. It sounds like you said that if you rip out the telos, right, then it reduces to kind of some mere hedonistic activity, right?
Yes.
But I'm not so sure why anyone should accept that, because there are just cases of people having sex, not just for pure hedonistic reasons, but because of something more thick, like love and bonding, right? It seems like there's a third option. I don't think it's a strict dichotomy between either we're fulfilling the telos or it's mere hedonistic pleasure and we're using each other as sex dolls. I just don't see why we can't accept the third option, where we're talking about some kind of bonding and that an activity that is done in love.
Well, what I would maybe ask to kind of understand your view there a little bit more is what would you say is the definition of love? Like if you had to define love, what would be love? And I'm not expecting you to give all, friendship, all that kind of love definitions, but more so within the context of a marriage or a romantic relationship.
Okay, yeah. So like the sense of like eros or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. I don't really know if I have a definition off the top of my head. I think that it definitely has to do with caring about another's well-being, right? But the thing is that the word love is often associated with feelings and other sorts of attitudes and after effects of desires and stuff like that. But I think that when I express that I love my wife, I'm at least expressing that I care about what's best for her.
That makes sense. That kind of self-giving, giving of oneself, and that sort of stepping outside yourself in order to love and care about your wife.
Yeah, I think there's a form of it, right? I might get really lucky and be able to care about her well-being in a way where I don't have to sacrifice anything. But yeah, there's that expectation. There's that expectation that I would.
And just to clarify, I was not implying there that it necessarily means like you're sacrificing, but more so you want you're giving of yourself in the way that you want to see her happy. You want to see her cared for, her sort of like needs met. If whether that's willing her emotional happiness, physical well-being, etc. Is that kind of your definition of romantic love?
Like I said, I don't really have a joint necessary sufficient conditions. Like I can define, I can define husband, right? Married man, right? That's easy. But love, you see, it's used in so many different ways. The only thing I could really convey is that when I'm saying that I love my wife, I'm at least expressing that I care about her well-being, and I'm expressing a kind of commitment to that, right?
Right.
But there might be
that
other
actually makes sense to me too. Just to clarify, this isn't a gotcha. I just wanted to get your full view fleshed out. But no, that makes sense. You're expressing a concern for her well-being. I think that was an excellent way of putting it. But as you were saying,
yeah, no. So you asked that question for clarification because I guess what I was going to say, or what I was going to, the argument, the concern that I have is this. On one hand, you said earlier that if a couple does not have the strive for that telos, then with respect to sex, right, then the sexual act is immoral. But you see, most couples, right, are probably, I would guess that I would guess a good portion, maybe 30% plus of couples, right, heterosexual couples, right, are not able to have children, right, because they're just too old, right? Around 40, it's 50, it's over, right? And so if you take that principle as sort of an absolute principle, right, there's just no exceptions, right, then you're going to get something like every time an elderly couple that knows that they're sterile, right, they're not, and because they don't know, because they know that they're sterile, it doesn't make sense to strive for procreation. So then every time they engage in that act, whether it's for eros, whether it's for their well-being, whether it's for hedonistic pleasure, no matter what, right, they're doing something immoral. And I just consider that to be a kind of reductio.
Well, the reason I asked your definition of love is I think this actually opens up to a very interesting conversation that might kind of give more credence to my view. You know, you said this idea of love is caring about your wife's well-being, which I would completely agree with, actually. And I think that in the procreative unity that I've laid out before, there is an element of giving in that act, even if that giving is not achieved in birth or the conception of a child. But that striving after that giving of oneself within the conjugal act that is inherent in the act of having a child.
Real quick, fellas, I just wanted to remind you guys the topic. Just letting you guys know the topic.
Yeah.
So just, you guys can carry on. It's a good conversation, but just reminding you guys of the topic. If you guys want to carry on, you carry on. But if not, just reminding you of the topic. By the way,
Perfect.
I have a few extra minutes. So if you guys want to talk an extra 20 minutes, it's up to you guys.
PINESAP, do you mind if I respond? Because I think that people are misunderstanding as to why this is relevant to our discussion. Here's why.
Right, it is.
Right.
It is.
Okay, if you guys think it's relevant, then you guys go ahead, carry on. Just wanted to remind you of the topic. That's all.
Okay.
Right. No, thank you, JP. I appreciate it. Just before you respond, Danny, I wanted to finish. So in striving after that goal, there is a giving of oneself. But when we know that there is going to be sort of a sterile act of sex, there's a sort of taking from that. I look at my wife looks at me, and we derive or we take sexual pleasure solely from that act. It's not that experiencing sexual pleasure is immoral, not at all, but it's that is the only thing that is engaged in sterile sex, is that taking of sexual pleasure away from the other party. And so in that way, I would say, since there is that act of taking, if one cares for the well-being of their wife, that's not really showing or conveying that care through an act of taking from one's wife, just merely sexual pleasure, rather than striving towards that act of self-giving that is inherent towards the procreative conjugal act, and thus a manifestation of that desire for one's well-being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll respond to that. Let me just try to do my best to explain why I think this is relevant. And maybe you might think that it's irrelevant, but this is why I think it's relevant, because
of course.
The way I see it is that PINESAP is giving a kind of a normative theory, a kind of a theory of sexual ethics. Okay, and what I'm doing is seeing whether it actually how it applies to heterosexual couples, right? And so what I'm trying to do is show that, well, look, if you hold to PINESAP's theory, then you get some kind of negative conclusion about heterosexual sex, where certain practices amongst heterosexual couples are actually immoral when most people don't think they're immoral. So it's a kind of consistency test, and that's why it's relevant. Because if I'm successful, then PINESAP's theory needs to be revised, and then we're back to the drawing board as to why we should think homosexuality is disorder. That's why I think this is relevant.
Right.
Yeah. So going back to what you said, so sexuality, you're taking pleasure. To me, I don't think I look at it as one causing each other pleasure. Each causes. It's like, I don't think of pleasure as like a money jar, right? Like if you know people that save the coins up, and like you come in and and you grab it, right? I don't look at pleasure that way. It's not like I have a jar of pleasure in here that my wife just takes from, but I can cause her pleasure, and that might be even giving her a compliment. Okay. And I don't think she's taking anything from me. I'm causing her happiness though. I don't really look at it as taking. I think look at it as causing. I don't know what you think about that.
I think though, what I see with that act of sex, and I wanted to clarify kind of the view on heterosexual immorality, right? Because I don't think, for instance, I'm Catholic, right? And so I believe actually sodomy, even within the context of a heterosexual relationship, is still sinful as well. So that's why, unlike any other church or ecclesial community, like the Protestants or Eastern Orthodox, we tend to have a very consistent sexual ethic where we say, look, you can't even use contraception within marriage, because what that does is, again, that takes out that procreative unity. It takes out that end or that telos meant between the husband and the wife engaging in the conjugal act. Whereas, as I think it's Thomas Hizau wrote a really good paper on why when Protestants or Eastern Orthodox essentially uphold contraception, but then they condemn homosexual acts, it's a little inconsistent, because they're already kind of granting a sexual act that is merely derivative for pleasure, only derivative for pleasure, not that pleasure being present in the conjugal act between a husband and wife striving after procreation somehow wrong. But when it's merely reduced to pleasure, when we're only having sex for pleasure and for a pleasurable experience, well, then it becomes very difficult for both those groups to condemn homosexuality, because they're essentially kind of promoting that type of sex within the confines of a heterosexual relationship. And so the mere presence of I would say that the mere presence of heterosexual couples engaging in, let's say, anal sodomy or using contraception or deliberately trying to have sterile sex is not a proof against my argument, but rather I would equally condemn that kind of behavior as not being ordered towards the end of what that marriage is meant to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as far as the point there, though, that if something's wrong, let's say, and I don't think so, but let's say something's wrong with anal sex, right? That doesn't mean that therefore homosexuality is wrong, because you can engage in homosexuality and actually not even commit any of those sorts of acts that you listed out, right? Presumably you think that a kiss, right, for two men to kiss romantically is a homosexual act, right? But presumably there are not studies to show that kissing like that is like going to cause an STD in the same way that anal sex is, or to any troubling degree. But you're still going to think that's wrong. And so it seems like the heart of your view is this telos thing, and and striving for it, not striving for it. That's why, that's to me the jugular. That's what I got to go for, right? In my own view. But I don't know if you had any response to that, but
well,
go ahead.
What I would say is that this kind of is from my opening statement, but even when there's not the presence of, let's say, oral sodomy or anal sodomy, again, when we talk about the end of an act or the end of the intention with an act, if I am a homosexual, right, if I am someone who has those feelings and I am directing those feelings in a certain way towards someone else, right, it means that any act that I engage in that is sort of indulging that pleasure, so to speak, right, sort of indulging the sexual thrill of men being attracted to other men, is trending itself towards a sexual temptation that would include those acts. Now, it's not the mere engaging of those acts, but it's the fact that the orientation is pointed towards that kind of lifestyle and that kind of end. So even with something like erotic kissing or what have you between two homosexual males, even though that doesn't necessarily involve an STD, it doesn't involve sort of the health problems of anal intercourse or what have you, it is still pointed, or a use of the faculty of romance towards a relationship that is not procreative unity.
Okay, so so you're saying that, yeah, right. So again, it comes down to this telos thing, right? You would say that a boy and a girl kissing, right, could be morally permissible, because as long as there's the condition that they have an intention to engage in procreation with their sexual partner, then it's fine. Although I'm wondering if that's the same thing, right? Like, do you think holding hands can be a sexual practice?
I don't think that holding hands is a sexual practice. I don't even necessarily think that kissing is a sexual practice, but all those practices are ordered towards enkindling certain romantic feelings that lead to a relationship that would be, a particular sexual orientation, if that makes sense. So if I kiss a girl, if I hold hands with a girl, it's not that I hold hands with a girl and she gets pregnant from that. That's not what I'm saying. That's absurd. But in enkindling those feelings, I clearly have a sexual desire for that girl. There is some level of sexual interest there present, and that sexual interest needs to be oriented. I think a better way to put it is it needs to be oriented towards a relationship that procreative unity would be a constituent part of it, right? Not that by kissing I get her pregnant or by holding hands I get her pregnant, but that by doing those things, the end of that romantic feeling I'm enkindling is towards a relationship where that procreative unity exists, or it's in principle existing within that relationship.
Okay. I don't know if I feel like my other line of thought, line of argument, right? I didn't really understand your response to the other line of argument where I feel like your view commits you to saying that elderly couples or couples over the age after menopause, basically, that it seems like if they know that they're sterile, I still don't understand how you're resisting that. Are you just biting the bullet and saying that, yeah, their sexual acts are immoral?
Well, it depends on the end of their heart or what they're trying to direct towards. If someone is just trying to have, irregardless of age, if someone is just trying to have sex to merely derive pleasure, not that pleasure is an element of, again, striving after procreation, right? But merely they're just trying to derive sexual pleasure, then yes, I do think it's sinful.
Okay, but I thought the condition for when a sexual act is immoral is simply just the fact that they're not striving for the telos.
Did I say something that contradicted that first point?
Well, you're adding a new ingredient here that what makes that wrong, if it's wrong, is not that they're not striving for the telos, it's that they're merely going for pleasure. It sounds like, in other words, go ahead.
That would be a diversion from that telos, is what I'm saying. So there's no contradiction between it, because if I engage in sex with my spouse and I know that we are not striving for an openness to life, is a good way to put it, then at that point, what I am trying to derive from that act is merely pleasure, right? Pleasure doesn't belong to the overall experience, but we're still striving after that openness to life. It's that I'm solely striving after pleasure. And in that regard, I'm contradicting, again, striving after procreation, if that's solely what I'm striving for.
Okay. So do you think that couples post-menopause, when they have sex, that they are all doing it merely for pleasure, as you're saying?
Well, yes, because again, this is what we talk about with love. And that's why I asked your view on love. What is the well-being of another? Or rather, what is that kind of giving or seeking what is best for another? If I look at my wife and I'm merely, even if she derives pleasure from the act, if we're merely using each other for sexual pleasure and there isn't that beauty of the procreative element that we're striving after, then what happens at that point is I'm essentially using my wife as a sex doll. I mean, this is why, again, contraception is evil, because I'm introducing a foreign element into the relationship to deliberately block any potential or responsibility for conception, merely so that I can experience pleasure.
Okay, so wait, okay, but the way I interpret merely for pleasure means that the only goal they have, they're only striving for a kind of bodily pleasurable sensation. But if your claim is that any couples post-menopause are only doing it for bodily sensations, right? I think that's empirically false, right? If you ask couples, right, why they have sex post-menopause, most of them many of them might say for pleasure, but many of them might say, well, it's something that we bond over, something that furthers our love. And at that point, if it furthers their bond and their love, it's not merely for pleasure.
But couldn't that be said the same of contraception too, right? Like when a girlfriend and a boyfriend have sex with each other and they introduce the use of condoms or hormonal birth control, and I ask them, well, you're merely just using each other for pleasure, and they say, no, 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 we love each other. I'm sure their intent is to love each other by doing that. But what I'm trying to get at is that that's not what's actually being achieved, right? The actual end of love, that self-giving, has to be that striving after procreation. When it's not striving after procreation, even if the justification for it is love, it in actuality is not the actual act that's being committed. And that's my takedown of homosexuality. Is I'm sure when homosexuals engage in any sex act, they claim it in the name of love, but in reality, due to the lack of presence of, again, that procreative unity that can only be between a man and a woman, it's merely using each other for essentially selfish sexual pleasure, even if there's another justification that they try to bring in.
Okay. Do you have any data or any reasons for anyone to support the idea that postmenopausal couples are only having sex for mere bodily pleasure?
Well, it's not so much as much of an opinion poll as it is, even if the justification is we love each other, that's not what's being achieved. What I'm trying to get at is that the utility of sex is that procreative unity. Once you strip out that procreative unity, you strip out the utility of sex and you're misusing your sexual faculties. Even if I have some justification for it, such as, for instance, I would say it's immoral for let me give an example for a moment, a way of analogy. Let's say a man's family is starving and he robs a bank to try and pay for, the house, for food, what have you. Even though his intent is good, right? His intent is to feed his family. His intent is to take care of family. It can't justify the immoral action that he used to achieve there. I'm essentially getting kind of contrasting against this end justifies the means type morality, where we justify an end just because of what we might say our intent was in doing it or how we feel about it. It doesn't really matter how I feel about having sex with my wife if I know the sex is sterile and it's my intention for it to be sterile just so we can have sex and there's not that striving after procreation. What I'm doing by doing that is using my wife in a sexual manner, even if I don't say that to myself or think I'm doing that.
Okay, so suppose hypothetically then, because it looks like you don't think there are any postmenopausal people that have sex for something other than mere bodily sensation. If there were a sterile couple who knew they were sterile, that did not strive for procreation because it's impossible, right? And did not simply do it for pleasure, but then nonetheless had another goal in mind and had sex, would you say that what they did is wrong?
I would, because again, the end does not justify the means. The end that they're achieving there is not striving after procreation, right? Even if they have another justification for why they're doing it, it doesn't really change the nature of the act. And I would kind of be interested, since you've been asking a lot of questions, I need to get some of mine in. So I think I asked you earlier, so your general sexual ethic is two consenting adults, right? So both are of age, probably the age of, you'd say probably 18, right? Like 18 or older.
Yeah, something like that.
So 18 or older, and it's two consenting adults that want to engage in a sexual act. My question to you is, what would be intrinsically immoral if, let's say, there was a father and a daughter? The daughter reaches the age of 18. She reaches, let's say, the age of reason, so to speak, or at least the age of consent. And she decides, and her father decides, with no manipulation or what have you, we would like to engage in a sexual relationship together. Mm-hmm. Is there anything intrinsically immoral about that?
Well, I would say that we should discourage it, and I'm fine with stopping it. There are laws that forbid that kind of thing, and I don't support that they get taken down. But I think that sort of standard is irreducible, right? I think that there's not a deeper reason other than the fact that they're related in that way. It's not, if it were to turn out that they would be more happy, I'd probably still be against it, right? But to me, cases of incest like that, right, are I think I'm disposed to stop them, discourage them for no deeper reason than the fact that they're incestuous.
But it seems to me what you're then doing is you're introducing another element outside merely the two adults seeking this sort of sexual experience together. You're introducing sort of a foreign element to your sexual ethic to then contrast this case versus, again, something like, a homosexual relationship, which, as I outlined in my opening statement, does involve a lot of sex acts that otherwise are disposed to a lot of health issues. So why is one necessarily immoral, but then the other's okay, if both have the principle of two consenting adults who are not being manipulated in any way, consenting to that sex act?
Yeah, and you're correct. I did add it, right? But that's the beauty of moral particularism, right? I don't hold up. My camera went crazy.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah. That's fine.
That's the beauty of moral particularism. I don't hold to any strict principles. It's a matter of context, right? So when I was trying to explain generally what I'm for or against, right, there are going to be contexts where it's not at the forefront of my mind, right? So on my view, right, there are these normal sort of circumstances where, we're faced with 30-year-olds attempting to have sexual relations with 15-year-olds. It's not very common for fathers to have a kind of relationship like that. If it is common, I wouldn't know very much about it. But
right.
Unlike you, right? You have a theory like that, a principled theory that covers all these situations. But I think I'm not a moral generalist. I'm a particularist. It's the facts about the particular situation. And in the kind of situation you described, it's the fact that it's incestuous that disposes me to discourage it or prevent it.
But don't you think that turns into a problem of an epistemic principle where suddenly it kind of seems like this case-by-case basis is really kind of an issue of like who determines what's moral or immoral? I mean, for instance, right, a lot of the arguments that I see that pushed, right, sort of the homosexual movement forward, right, in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s about consent, or even initially the argument was we just want to be left alone or we don't want to be demonized. Those same moral principles are now being used to justify things like pedophilia. I mean, there was that one woman, right, in 2018, I think it was at the University of Munich or what have you, who gave that TED Talk saying we need to stop demonizing pedophilia, right? And her argument wasn't necessarily to start with like we need to justify it, but that it's like these people, they didn't ask to be born this way. They didn't ask to have these desires and these thoughts. And so we need to stop demonizing it. That seems to me to be the principle that undergirded sort of the sexual revolution in regards to homosexuality. And so I guess my question is, where does the buck stop? Like at what point, once you open the floodgates about, this kind of like, I didn't ask to be this way. This sort of moral particularism of I judge it on a case-by-case basis, who's making the morality, right? And who is defining what is or isn't moral?
Yeah, so I guess you're asking, the way I use the term moral, wrong, right, good or bad in these sort of contexts, I'm talking about our values, right? To me, I don't understand what value would be independent of a person, right? I think that's in some way I kind of see the theistic view, moral meta-ethical view, a little bit more intelligible than some of these non-naturalists in that they're understanding, some of them, not all of them, some theists understand good and bad, right and wrong in terms of the will of God, the values that God has. And, in some way, I do understand if what you mean by good is what God wants, right? I get that, right? I don't know what goodness would be independent of a will, right? So to me, good and bad, right and wrong is a function of our values. And if there's a group that oppose our values, right, then on my view, that's not really so much. Sometimes it's a philosophical issue. You might have shared values to show why they're being inconsistent, right? But if you have no shared core values, right, then they're just an op, right? And they're to be politically frustrated. I don't think there's much of a philosophical disagreement. There's a political disagreement at that point.
So I guess then my question would be if shared values are kind of what defines morality or what defines sort of moral thinking, what would you say if let's say you were in like the minority group? I'm not saying you're the minority, but you're the minority group in terms of upholding a certain value. Like, I know this is kind of an absurd case. I don't think any society would be this way. But let's say there was a society that thought, actually, this is a real life example. You know, India prior to the invasion of the British or British colonization thought that it was morally acceptable to throw women on funeral pyres when their husbands died as kind of a sign of like, you're going with him and, you know, she belongs to you. And the British stopped that practice. If you lived in Indian society prior to the British colonizing India and stopping a practice like that, and you were in, so to speak, the moral minority of thinking that that practice is wrong, would it then not be wrong because the majority of Indian society thinks that it's moral?
Right. So are you asking me? So I currently believe that whatever you described is bad or wrong. Okay.
Right.
And so now, had I been in a certain situation, had I lived differently, had I been born there, my values would be very different. Okay, that's true. But what matters when I make the moral judgment is not the values that I hypothetically would have, but the values that I'm currently having right now, right? The values that I have. So I don't see why I should care about hypothetical Danny's values, right? If hypothetical Danny's values was wanted to, I don't know, commit genocide against Catholics, okay, right? I'd be like, yeah, that's bad, right? But because the relevant index is not, weird anti-Catholic Danny, it's the Danny you're talking to right now. So when I say that those things are bad, right? What matters is the index that matters is my values and other people's that share those values.
But I think the reason I brought up that analogy, even though it's a hypothetical, is more to illustrate the fact that if morality in that way is so socially dependent, or it's dependent on the society we live in, or sort of the shared values amongst that society, and there's no really thing existing outside of ourselves that defines morality, right versus wrong, then even this debate, whether homosexuality is disordered or properly ordered, so to speak, is kind of irrelevant, because at that point, homosexuality just is. It's not disordered or properly ordered. It's mere assertions of the will, while in a naturalistic sense, it just merely exists. And at that point, things like, even things as horrible as like murder, pedophilia, incest, all those things, they merely just exist. And any sort of moral quality we denote to them in your worldview just seems kind of arbitrary. It seems like just something I merely assert, but there's no real foundation on which it rests.
I thought we would have agreed on this because I understand right and wrong, good and bad in terms of a will. And it could be your will, it could be my will, our will, that's the sensical sense of that's the sense of good that I understand in this context. Okay?
Right.
And so if that could be understood in terms of the will of God. It could be understood of what God and I value, what I value, right? If you're criticizing that view, then it sounds like you're appealing to a sense of good that's independent of will, and then thus independent of the will of God and my will and your will. And I don't find that intelligible.
Well, what I would say is that, if we look at, for instance, the Bible's prohibition of homosexuality, right? So we take like Romans 1, St. Paul does say that homosexuality is contrary to the will of God. I agree with you on that. Mm-hmm. But there is a natural order that God creates. There is a natural law that God creates that gives justification to his divine commands, right? So as St. Paul says, it's contrary to nature, right? And that in someone engaging and being inflamed with homosexual lust, they are consumed with passion towards one's own sex. That corresponds to even sort of evidential results, such as what I laid out in my introduction, right? That oftentimes homosexuals, and I say this with no malice in my heart, but live very rough lifestyles. They don't have as long of a sort of lifespan as we do. I mean, two famous homosexual revisionists who tried to argue that like the Bible doesn't condemn homosexuality, Alan Bray, I believe it's Alan Bray and John Boswell.
I mean, both of them died of AIDS at like 38, and I think that's very sad. And so I think with the will of God, it's not merely that God issues like an arbitrary command and he says, this just is the way it is, so be it. But that there's a nature or a reason that corresponds to the faith we have in why he orders certain things.
Okay, and so that nature, that reason is independent of God's will.
It's not independent of God's will, it's correspondent to it, faith and reason, right?
Well,
So
it corresponds
the
with
nature, so nature here means what is our natural end? What is, again, our telos? I don't mean occurring in nature, because lots of things occur in nature that are completely immoral, right? I mean, animals rape each other or eat their babies or what have you. Clearly, that's an immoral action, right? But nature here means what is our natural end? What are we created for?
Yeah, but you said that reason isn't independent of God's will, but it corresponds with it. But to say that it corresponds with it is compatible with saying it's independent. In fact, if anything, this is like the Kantian view, where Kant thinks that God is an agent that perfectly aligns with reason. And reason is independent of God, right? You can have goodness, you can have reason, rationality without God in principle, right? And it sounds like that you're actually, because I thought that we would understand good and bad, right and wrong in terms of our values, people's values, person's values, and whether if you want to include the will of God in there, that's fine. We can talk about that. But it now looks like you're saying there's a sense of morality that's indispensable to the conversation, because without this sense of morality, there's no debate, as you're saying. That is external to any will, including the will of God. And to me, I just can't make sense of that. To me, that sounds like nonsense.
Well, I think that's a mischaracterization of what I'm trying to say, right? God creates reality, right? And reality, contained within himself in the view of classical theism, has certain moral principles that correspond to what he orders or what he wills, right? And so, when I murder someone, there are certain natural results that occur from that kind of convey it's immoral, right? I mean, intuitively, it's like, I know murder is wrong because of the harm or the sort of pain that it causes, right? But in your worldview, in sort of the atheist worldview, this is what Jay Dyer, I think, brought up in your guys' debate on Piers Morgan's show about the is-ought distinction. Mm-hmm. It's like in the atheist worldview where there's no epistemic foundation for right or wrong. It's just merely asserted by the individual or how the individual feels or what they define as moral. These things just merely are, right? So murder is just a thing. It's just atoms essentially or biological processes shutting down because there's some foreign object introduced into someone's body when you stab them, right? But you can't derive a moral conclusion in that epistemology because there's really no justification for it. It just is. It just exists.
Okay. So are you saying you agree with Hume's observation?
About the is-ought distinction?
Yeah. Did you agree with what Hume said about is and ought?
Yeah, I would say that I agree with the is-ought distinction in regards to
did you agree with
how
Hume?
It applies to the atheist worldview.
Right. But did you agree with Hume's, because you repeated Jay Dyer's argument. Jay Dyer thought that Hume, right, cuts against atheism by bringing the is-ought. But do you agree with what Hume said about the is-ought distinction?
Well, I'm sure you're going to say something kind of pertaining to his more atheistic worldview or what have you, but go right ahead.
Well, I'm saying, so are you aware of Hume's view on is-ought?
I'm familiar with the cliff notes on it, or rather how it applies in this context, but I'm not so sure about maybe what he might have believed about it in regards to religion.
Well, I appreciate that. Jay Dyer wouldn't have the balls to say that he doesn't know it, but the point is that Hume actually, I agree with Hume to this extent, by the way. Hume actually pointed out two examples of jumping from statements of is to statements of ought. He gives two examples. He appeals to the being of God as is, because remember, God is. On the Thomistic view, what? God is not, it's not true that God exists. God is existence. God is good, right? So, and then, so he says, he actually says something like, oh, well, when I hear statements about the being of God, and also he talks about, and statements of human affairs, which presumably I interpret that as we are sick, right? We're bleeding, we're hungry, right? He actually takes the secular talk of like what maybe, you know, Mill and Bentham might be talking, although they're, I think Bentham is contemporary of Hume. I could be wrong about that. I think that's around the same time period. But the point is that Hume is pointing that actually this is a problem for both theist and atheist, right? Because what you guys do, and what sometimes theists and atheists will say, look, this is the way God is. This is the way things are. And you did a lot of that in your opening statement. You said, this is what happens, right? People die of STDs. In fact, Hume would point out that you're describing human states of affairs when you're appealing to all that data, right? And then Hume remarks, now all of a sudden I'm getting statements of ought and wrong and good and bad, right? So I actually agree with Hume, and I think you should too, that the theist and the atheist, right, are actually both guilty of describing how things are and getting to how things ought be. And I don't see how you're doing the same thing.
Well, I would disagree, because if reality is contained within God, God orders reality, that means that he orders us with certain ends. And that's why I bring up the natural law. Atheists don't believe in that end because everything is just sort of an accident, right? So our existence, why we're here, why we evolved. Well, hold on. Why we evolved to be the way that we are or what have you is merely just an existence. There's no ordering, there's no telos, there's no sort of essential quality to our nature. It just simply exists. And so I don't think that it really is a problem for theists at all. I think it's very much a problem for atheists because they don't have any epistemic foundation to justify any morals or ethics at that point. It's just merely asserted on their own will, on the principle of their own will.
Well, I might be very interested into why you think that atheists are committed to thinking that there is no telos in any sense. But this idea, if you think, look, here's the argument for why the Izot cuts against your view, right? You say God is existence. Existence itself is God. Those are identical. So then what you say is that existence itself, right, is goodness because God is identical to goodness. And then you're getting a statement of how things are to a normative, evaluative statement, which is a kind of odd, a kind of morality, goodness. Okay. So I just don't see how you're not guilty of bridging the Izot gap unjustifiably. Or I'm trying to go back to your argument for why atheists are committed to saying there's no order or telos in any sense.
Well, I don't understand the jump in logic there, because if God is good, right, and all existence is contained within God, and God orders certain commands of us or lays down certain moral principles, then there's no epistemic problem for us because we know what is or isn't wrong. With atheism, what cuts against atheism in particular is that if we are merely an accident of history, we're merely monkeys that managed to evolve on a rock, and this rock happened to have the perfect enough conditions for us to be rational or what have you, there is no foundation, there's no basis for any sort of morality, because what you then define as moral still has to exist within something like a Christian framework, right? Even if that Christian framework that you use is kind of post-Christian, or there's certain elements that are manipulated in a different way, right? You still are having to justify a certain moral framework that really only makes sense within a theistic worldview, whereas in an atheistic worldview, it's just merely asserted on the part of human beings.
All right, you're making a lot of points, and if you feel like I'm not addressing one, you can tell me to address a specific one. But the idea is that you're saying you don't have an epistemic problem. This is not the Izot problem is not an epistemic problem. It's a conceptual / metaphysical problem.
Well, how is it not an epistemic problem? Because how am I to know in an atheist worldview what is or isn't wrong? Let me ask you that.
Okay, so you asked two questions. I'll answer both in order what you asked.
Okay.
How is it not an epistemic problem? Because Hume is not pointing out a problem about knowing what is good. He's pointing out an observation that how are you going from the concept of is to the concept of ought, right? It's an ontological, conceptual problem. He's not pointing out a problem with knowledge. And your second question was, sorry, could you repeat your second question?
So how is it that atheists are able to derive any sort of moral conclusions if there is no foundation for morality within an atheistic framework?
Well, I just reject
based on being, based on how the universe is ordered and what have you.
Yeah.
Because you criticized me and you said, well, you're rejecting the thesis that atheists say that there is an end to something, right? which I would say that for the atheist, it's just merely something asserted. It's just something you say is the end, right? Like having kids propagates the human species or what have you. And it's like, okay, but like, why should I do that? Like if I live within an atheist framework like the one you're promoting, it's like, what is the value in having children or not killing someone if that person's inconveniencing me or what have you?
Yeah. To me, I don't understand atheism as a framework. It's a denial of a framework, right? Specifically the theistic one. So
Fellas, you guys have about 20 more minutes. Do you guys want to increase the time of your conversation, or you want to leave it at the
maybe let's just, for the sake of time, get back to more the question of homosexuality. I think we've gotten off the reservation a little bit.
Okay,
I know it's kind of relevant, but it's
PINESAP, do you want me to answer this question, or do you want to
Okay, do you guys
yeah,
want to stick to the 20? Do you guys want to go a little longer? I'm a little bit
JP, if you could give maybe just like 5 more minutes so Danny can answer the question.
So we'll do 25 minutes then, because you guys have 20 minutes left. I'll add another
Perfect. That sounds good.
minutes.
So go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, so I don't understand atheism as a framework of anything. It's a denial. It's a denial of a framework. Okay, so atheism doesn't imply any particular moral view, and I think that any metaethical view, including ones that are opposed to mine, is compatible with atheism, other than divine command theory.
But again, that's just something you're asserting. Like there's no order to anything in existence that justifies that. That's just saying.
What are you saying?
Because essentially, what it's saying is, I feel a certain way about something, so therefore it is right or wrong. Like I feel murder is wrong, or I feel that this is this particular sexual ethic. And what I'm trying to get at is, within that framework, it's a vacuum. There's no real justification on a deeper level for any kind of morality. It's just merely something that's like asserted by the will of the person that's asserting it.
Okay, well, but why are atheists committed to understand morality in terms of feeling?
Well, because again, you don't have any foundation for your morality.
But why do you believe that? I don't understand.
Well, but this is the entire, because you just said we reject the entire theistic worldview, right? If you reject the theistic, not worldview, framework. If you reject the theistic framework, then again, everything is accidental. Like everything is just causes upon other causes upon other causes, right? Like the earth coming into existence, human beings existing, or what have you. They're just things that happen, and you can't derive any sort of moral conclusion from that. That's what I'm trying to say.
I don't know why you think that.
Well, hold on. If all of this is accidental, and you derive a moral conclusion from that, what I'm trying to get at is it's all arbitrary. There's no like foundation for anything. It's just you're merely asserting something.
Why would any atheist be committed to the fact that everything is accidental? I don't understand.
Well, because that's what atheism is. Like atheism doesn't believe that there's any sort of reason for why we exist, or that there's any sort of like telos or end for our nature.
Atheism is the denial that God exists or gods exist. It's not that.
So, okay, then what is your justification for ends within nature? Like, what is our end? What is our purpose?
Well, I don't know what you mean by an end exactly.
Why are we here?
Why are we here talking, or why is there something rather than nothing?
I mean, why does anything exist? Like why, like within your framework, like why is murder wrong? Like if there's no like deeper foundation for why murder is wrong, aren't you just merely asserting that as an atheist?
Well, there's a difference between murder and killing. Murder is just defined as wrong killing. So are you asking me, because murder is wrong is just a definitional truth.
Well, but again, like the fact that you even have that kind of distinction implies that there's something outside of yourself that defines a certain kind of moral principle.
I'm not trying to imply that.
So then, again, I keep going back. I keep going back to this principle about what is the foundation for your morality. Because earlier, what I said about like adult incest.
I thought I answered this. A will. That's the foundation.
I know, but that's just your will. And if someone else comes along and they say, this is my will, well, then you kind of both have a equal playing field in terms of morality, right? If someone, for instance, comes along and this might sound absurd, but this is kind of the framework we're operating within, right? If someone comes along and they say, well, I think that person that inconvenienced me deserves to die because what they did was egregious enough that I find it morally repugnant and they need to be killed as a result, they have as much of a claim to moral truth as you do. In you saying that it's wrong to kill that person just because they wronged them on some like inconsequential thing, or what you would view as inconsequential.
Yeah, I don't see why I'm committed to that. It sounds like you're attacking something called agent relativism, which is the idea that when there's an evaluation, I'm the observer, there's something happening, and then that on agent relativism, I'm just committed to whatever agents I'm evaluating to their views, right? So if they think it's good, then I have to think it's good. But I'm not an agent relativist. I'm an appraiser relativist in these contexts, right? The idea is that what they think, right, whatever their will is, might not matter to me at all in that case, right? What matters is the observer's appraisal, their stances, their values, their will.
But again, that goes back to the question, do you as Danny define morality, or does someone else, right? Like, why do you have more of a claim to define morality than that other person? That's what I'm trying to get at.
And look, it may not be that I'm defining reality, because it might be a function of a collective will. So it might be my will, God's will together. I don't know, right? The point is that my view is compatible with theism. This is the view I held when I was a Christian, that morality is a function of will. And as a theist, I thought it was God's will, or my will plus God's will. Okay, it was our will. Now, as an atheist, I just take the same view, except I cut God out and I don't see the problem.
But again, I think that's arbitrary. That's what I'm trying to get at. Because when I said that originally at kind of the beginning of our discussion, right, where the fact that you're even asserting that there's a certain moral order to sex, right, where homosexuality is permissible or what have you, implies that there is a certain moral standard by which we all must abide by.
No, I'm not
My
saying
question is who defines that moral standard? Because let's say I don't know, this sounds stupid, but like I'm king of America, right? And I say that, and it's not my intention to hurt people for merely struggling with same-sex attraction, but like, let's say I say, okay, people can't get like gay married, there can't be gay unions or what have you, and people cannot engage in sodomy, and I make laws against that. Would that be immoral for me to do?
Would it be immoral for me to? Yeah, well,
would it be immoral for me to make those laws? Is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I would evaluate them as bad.
But on what basis? Merely just you asserting it, or some principle outside yourself?
Presumably our shared values.
But I don't share your values in that model, is what I'm saying.
Oh, well, then it would be my values and other people that agree with me.
But what if you are the moral minority? Like, this is what I was trying to get at with the India example, right? Because if you're the only one who upholds a certain kind of morality, and it's just kind of like contingent on where you live or what have you, then there's no real like carryover, right? It's just
carryover.
There's no carryover from culture to culture of what's wrong. I mean, for instance, if you live in a culture that thinks that, you know, like women are no better than like cattle or what have you, and you go to that culture and you find that view abhorrent or what have you, you know, in my view, where I think that there are universals, I can go to any culture and say that's immoral regardless of where I live. But your view is contingent on like where you're born and just what you as Danny seem to assert as immoral or moral.
Okay, I'm still trying to understand your criticism. I don't know if I can repeat it. Let me try to repeat it. So
well let me just make it super straightforward. Okay. I think that your view on morality is arbitrary because it's defined.
What do you mean by arbitrary?
Arbitrary as in you are merely asserting that something is wrong or right because Danny asserts that it's wrong or right, and that there's no principle outside yourself that defines right versus wrong.
Is there a principle outside of God that defines right and wrong?
No, that principle that defines right or wrong is
So
God.
his is
right?
arbitrary,
Because
then.
here's the thing. I exist, right? And I can do all kinds of immoral stuff. I can be, I mean, look, even in my own personal life, I'm a horrible sinner. I do bad things. I've hurt people. I've said bad things. But my actions are evaluated outside of myself by God. That's independent of my personal feeling towards morality. I could deny God's existence. I could say, you know, what I'm doing here or there is perfectly fine when I wrong another person or I use another person. And it still holds that what I'm doing is wrong, irregardless of how I might feel about it.
Okay, so is your criticism, if I understand it, saying that, look, if a person says that moral claims, evaluative claims, are a function of their will, their values, right? it's going to be arbitrary insofar as that none of their moral claims are made true by independent standards from that agent.
In a certain sense, yes, because I think that the moral order of the universe is such that we exist within it, right? And in that way, it is independent of us in terms of not how we feel about it, right? So if I do something immoral, regardless of how I feel about it, whether I feel killing is right or killing is wrong, killing is still wrong, even if I feel it's right. That's what I'm trying to get at. It seems like in your view, you're formed by a culture that is steeped with Christianity. And so, of course, you would say killing is wrong, using other people is wrong. Even when you were talking about the definition of love, which is willing the well-being of your wife, that's very much from a like Christian ethos or a Western ethos because of Christianity, right? But in your view, that starts and stops with you. It doesn't exist outside of you. You just merely assert this is wrong or this is right. And
So
it
you're
starts and stops at your perception.
So I am characterizing you correctly that if an agent, if there's a moral statement made by an agent, right? Sorry, my camera. If there's a moral statement, if there's a moral statement made by an agent who thinks that it's their will or their values that make it true and no standard independent of their agency, then it's arbitrary. If you're saying yes to that, then it seems like you can have morality outside of God because God himself is an agent, right? There's no independent standard of his will, so that would make it arbitrary and thus untenable to your view. And then there would be an independent standard of the good by which is compatible with atheism.
Hold on. You're contradicting yourself though, because earlier you said the classical view of theism is that reality is contained within God. Even though God is an agent, right, in what you just said, we exist within him as an agent, right? We exist within the reality that he creates, right? So it's not big bearded guy in the sky telling me what to do and I'm down here. It's that reality is self-contained within God. And thus, we don't act independent of him in the sense that we are outside the reality that he created. There's no distinction there.
Okay. So wait, are you saying that? Okay, so you're saying that because this is how I'm interpreting you. You can correct me, but you're saying
no, that's fine. That's fine.
If you have a prescription, let's say "Thou shalt not lie" from the Ten Commandments or something,
right?
Like that.
Right.
You're saying what makes that true is not the will of God; it's some other fact about God, and thus it's not arbitrary.
Well, no, the will of God, right? God willed everything into existence. If we read the Bible, God willed everything into reality and what have you. And inside the reality that he created, there is evidence of what we are to do or not do, right? Where as I stated earlier, if you live a homosexual lifestyle, there are all these resulting elements that show his prescription against homosexuality, as being immoral, right? It corresponds with the reality that he created. So reality, if it's contained within God, and there are results like, if I murder someone, I cause their family pain, I end their life, I end their agency and what have you, right? Those are results of a deeper truth that he conveys in his commandments that are evidenced by the reality that he created.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I understand all of that. I'm not so sure where you want to go. I could probe what you said, or
no, that's fine.
Because you did want to ask about more of the homosexual stuff, didn't you?
Oh, absolutely. I was just curious, JP. How much time are we at, brother?
12 minutes and 30 seconds. If you guys
that's
want
not
more
bad.
time,
I think we could ask more questions about that. So,
all right. So we go with 12 minutes 30. We're gonna end it there. Do you fellas want to continue chatting a little longer? I'll add some more time. My house is your house, fellas.
So, I guess what I would ask Danny, right, in regards to the topic of homosexuality, and this is kind of relevant to what we've been talking about. So we know that it is our biological need to go get food, right, to have homeostasis, feed our bodies, nourish our bodies. Mm-hmm. You would, of course, say that something like anorexia or bulimia is disordered, right?
I think it's bad. If that's what you mean by disorder, that's fine.
Yes, okay. Very much. You can use them as the same term. Okay. So is it then the case in regards to like sexual desire or what we desire in terms of a sexual encounter or what have you, or an end of a sexual encounter, that there is some moral framework of what can be disordered or bad, what can be bad or what can be good.
If by moral framework you mean a generalist normative theory, I'm a particularist, right? So I'm very suspicious of generalist normative theories like utilitarianism, virtue ethics, Kantian deontology. I think that these do not respect our untidy moral lives. I think that really the answer is given in the context. So I'm not a fan of a moral framework if what you mean is a generalist normative ethical theory. Normative theory.
A generalist. Okay, so, but I think that kind of butts up against the question that I asked earlier about the adult incest, right? Like, you know, even though you're a moral particularist, it seems like there is just this sort of like bobbing of if incest is wrong, adult incest is wrong because there's that familial relation, there's a certain negative element that comes from what should be the role of a father and like protecting and caring for his child, having sexual desire. Why is it then the case that homosexuality is not disordered, right? When I've evidenced from my opening statement that there are a bunch of STDs correspondent with it, that something like anal intercourse or oral sodomy leads to these different not only STDs, but sort of like
10 minutes.
The breakdown of sort of like the anal cavity or what have you, right? Why is that suddenly not immoral if it leads to all those bad results?
Right. So I'm not a consequentialist, right? I'm not a utilitarian. So I don't think that the consequences of an action necessarily determine the rightness or wrongness of that action, right? So, you know, a homosexual person might even say that, yeah, in engaging with this relationship or being promiscuous, right, it might lead to the detriment of my health, right? That to say that therefore the action is wrong would make you a committed consequentialist. If you're saying it's just simply the secret ingredient to morality is the consequences of that sort, right? And I'm just not a consequentialist.
So, at what point is doing something to at what point is someone sort of doing something to themselves that is self-harming, right? Or that does lead to maybe a negative health impact or kind of harming their health in some way? At what point is that immoral? Like if someone, for instance, you know, we were all in middle school and high school, so we all heard about a friend doing this or whatever. You know, they cut themselves, right? And they say, this gives me a feeling of relief. I feel relieved cutting myself. It makes me feel better about myself to cut my arm. Would you say that cutting yourself is immoral?
And in the cases where it happens often in our reality, yeah.
But doesn't that then seem like the same sort of consequentialism that you're criticizing?
But a consequentialist is a generalist position. It's saying that in every case, what makes rightness or wrongness is the consequences, right? I might say in some cases, the consequences might matter, but in other cases, it may not matter, all right? So that's the thing is, as a particularist, you might say in some cases, virtues matter. In some cases, maybe duty matters. In some cases, the consequences matter, right? But I can look, there are normal circumstances that we find ourselves in our actual world, and I can make loose, sort of sets of factors that often pop up and then dispose to prevent something or discourage something or disapprove of something. And I try to be loose with that. Like I generally, value consent, adult sexual relationships are the adult factor, the incest factor. These are all factors, right? But I just don't think that they're factors in every single conceivable situation, even like in fantasy, because that's my problem with generalists, right? Like you can always devise, if you take a principle, you can always devise a crazy hypothetical to show why some other factor actually is more important.
I just think that with that worldview, you kind of have a breakdown of morality that could lead to some very terrifying results, right? Like if take for instance, like the case of eugenics in Nazi Germany, right? Someone could look at what could be called like the material good. Now, I don't say that like that is good, but they look at the material good and they say, well, this child with...
What do you mean by material good? Sorry.
Material good here, at least the way that this person would define it, is if they were to sterilize, for instance, someone with like Down syndrome, right, or autism, or something that they said was a disorder worth sterilizing for, then they could justify it by saying, well, it leads to the overall health of the race, and if we do
Oh, like a
this, like,
consequentialist thing.
yes. So
Okay.
what inherently, like, in your worldview, when you talk about these factors or what have you, I guess my question is, how does that not lead to something like eugenics in Nazi Germany?
Because
Right?
to me, where morality matters is in the circumstances where you have where I'm going to find myself in, and those actual circumstances, and then the factors that present themselves there, right? So morality doesn't collapse because I'm presented with scenarios every day as to whether what I should do, right or wrong, right? The point is
Right.
that I'm skeptical of an overarching theory. It's actually, if it helps, I actually look at food, the good food, very similarly. I don't think there's an overarching theory of what makes food good. It's just very, but you can generalize. I generally don't like to eat shit, right?
Right.
Right. But you could factor some crazy fantasy hypothetical where eating shit is good. In fact, there are animals that eat shit and it's actually a good thing. Dung beetles, right? So if I was like a dung beetle, it'd be great, right? So the point is that I kind of look at morality like food, and so far as what makes good food, what makes for right and wrong decisions, good decisions, bad decisions. It's a case by case basis, and you can make loose conclusions about what factors are relevant.
I think, though, that winds up kind of turning back into things having like a certain particular result from
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
from like doing that action, right? So, for instance, the dung beetle, right? This is why I brought up telos and nature earlier. The dung beetle, it does make sense for the dung beetle to eat dung because it belongs to its nature to do so in order. And I don't know the exact science behind dung beetles.
Me
You could
neither.
probably,
Me neither. Don't worry, you're safe.
Yeah, we need a biologist in here.
Right.
But for the dung beetle, it belongs to its nature that maybe eating the dung or what have you helps with digestion. It helps with its overall health. And it would make sense in that case why it would eat dung, because it is created with that nature where it does make sense for it to go and do that action, right? And this is what I'm saying about human beings, or rather sort of sexual ethics, is it belongs in our nature. If you look at, even as I say to my intro, human biology, right? Not to be crass, but the penis and the vagina, they fit together in such a way that in our very biology, in our very DNA, there's that unity. And that there's that unity that results in the beautiful creation of a child, that our biology is only sort of a like outward extension of that interior nature that we were made for, right? Mm-hmm. And so because there is that unity, we are made with a sort of end or sort of purpose for using that sexual faculty in a correct manner. Mm-hmm. And it sounded kind of like you were asserting that a little bit in your example of the dung beetle, even though you're talking about food and being, taste being kind of subjective. It all exists within a certain result, these factors, so to speak, that lead to a certain good or bad result that then I can make a moral determination from.
Yeah, the dung beetle was just, it wasn't just to say that, look, maybe if my telos was the same as a dung beetle. In fact, actually, let's use that example. Suppose I am the way I am today, my psychology, my biology, but
right.
There was let's say an evil demon, the Cartesian evil demon comes up and then inverts my telos to dung beetle telos, right? I don't think that therefore that commits me to eating shit, right? I just ignore my telos. I think it would be good to ignore that telos, right? So to me, telos is not the magical ingredient. In fact, I'm skeptical of an universal magical ingredient of morality. To me, it's very contextualized.
Okay, I see. JP, are we at time?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. So I guess my issue with that is, if the Cartesian demon comes up and he changes your nature to be the dung beetle, well, being the dung beetle would result in your biology being such a way that you have to live by eating dung, right? Even though we conceive of that as gross, that now belongs to your nature to have a certain result or have a certain end in eating that dung in order to survive. And so if you just refuse to do so, sadly, with your nature, you would pass away. You would die conceivably in the example that you cited.
All right. I know we're close in time, so I'm going to try to say something that doesn't prompt you to want to respond.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay, so to give, if you could take the last word if you want, but just so that you don't feel like sometimes, you could always feel like I really want to respond to that. So I'll try to say
of course.
as neutral as possible. Let's just put it this way. Your account of telos is different than how I understood the Aristotelian account of telos, and that might be something to talk about.
Gotcha. I think we can cut it off there for Q&A.
All right, perfect. We could do 20 minutes of Q&A.
Perfect.
Do you fellas want participants to come up on the panel, or would you rather it be the case where we read them off the chat? That's up to you.
I'm indifferent, whatever.
I'm indifferent too. It's whatever you would like, JP.
I'd rather talk to people, but we don't.
Okay, well,
we would be, but if they're just giving their question and they have to leave, might as well just read it off.
No. You guys can have an open discussion with the audience, but it'll be for 20 minutes, and then after that,
we'll try not to take too much time with them, but they might ask a follow-up question, and that makes sense.
Yeah. It's up to your discretion. Okay, so I posted the link here. If you guys want to come in and ask Danny or PINESAP a question regarding the conversation, this is going to be the link right here. I'm pinning it. So let me write this better off. Hold on. Link to join the convo. Here it is. Okay, let's see here. Link to join the convo, replace pinned message. All right, so I pinned it. All you have to do to join this conversation, if you're interested, is click that link. In the meantime, if anybody has a question, feel free to ask. I'm going to start a timer now, and we'll go from there. So this is your opportunity to come up. And
there were no super chats that ask questions, or do you?
It's open. It's up to the person.
I didn't know if there were older super chats. I don't know.
Oh, I don't know how to find those. Thank you for supporting. If you asked a super chat, but it wasn't the time.
You need to get on that, JP. You need to see people work 60 hours a week, and they $3 in their savings account, and they're
read all super chats. I will read all super chats. All super chats will be read. We have an individual here that joined. Just give me one moment here. All right. How's it going, Noah?
All right. Once I just get my headset set up.
No worries.
Let me see if that. Oh, you can hear me?
Yes, they can hear you.
PINESAP, we've talked a dozen of times.
Of course, buddy. It's good to see you. How are you doing, Noah?
Doing already. But I just want to, like I said, it's 20 minutes, so I'm just gonna make my question real quick. More of a point before work. I want to start listening around a half an hour in. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so around a half an hour in, I was coming into the conversation of the idea of like menopause. I think the argument was going there between menopause. I would maybe rephrase the question of, well, yes, a husband and wife could, even if they are in menopause, they can, as long as the act of the penis inside the vagina it's the idea of the procreative act, even if it's not physically possible, it's the idea that is occurring, even though maybe not be possible, but that act of itself, that is the act of what we're going towards. That is what is the nature you were talking about. I forgot the word you guys both were using for the nature, starts with an L. But that was the case. So I would say that would be the reason of why homosexuality is disordered. You could correct me if I'm wrong here, if I'm getting that kind of thought process wrong, but that's all I had to say.
No, I think that would sort of track, because the end of what you're directing your action towards is still the sort of conjugal act. Whereas, with homosexuality, what you're doing is conceivably, if you're having sort of the normal interaction that a lot of gay couples have, where they're having, kind of anal sodomy, they're using a part of the body that is not meant for sex as a sex organ. And that leads to then health problems or what have you. So even if it was still immoral for the couple to have like sterile sex or what have you, what they're directing their parts towards, what they're directing their sexual faculty towards, is still shooting for the target. Whereas homosexuality, if we're using like an archer analogy, they're shooting away from the target.
Thank you. I would say for both y'all, PINESAP and also Danny, I have actually never heard you speak before, but you were very eloquent in your speaking. It was great on both sides today. I actually learned a lot, and thank you very much, guys.
Absolutely.
All right. Is my mic on?
Yes, sir.
All right,
gentlemen, you guys are my guests here today. We do have quite a few guests that have requested. It is up to you guys if you guys want to have a little continual open panel, or if you, it's up to you guys. So what would you guys like to do? Do you guys want to talk to people maybe another 30, 40 minutes, or are you guys pressed for time? Do you want to stay on schedule for the 20 and do the 5 minute, maybe come back some other time? It's up to you guys.
Danny, would you be okay if we just stay on schedule for this time? I'd love to come back, honestly. I think that just might be better for the time being.
Okay. Yeah, it's up to you guys. The reason I'm asking is because this is super informal. So it's really up to you guys. I'm flexible. All
Perfect.
right. You guys still have another. I put 25 minutes on the timer just because it was live people. So you guys still have around 20 minutes. So you guys can carry on. Fellas, feel free to have a conversation. If the conversation goes a little prolonged, the brothers here will just let you know, hey, I think it's time to move on. So don't feel rushed to leave, okay?
Awesome. Christus, you were the one talking?
Yeah. All right. So obviously, so I'm just wondering what your thoughts will be. So of course, you said that essentially no one having sex while sterile would be immoral, but I'm wondering if it would be immoral in this context, and it didn't really hear mentioned. So of course, we made the theologies because I'm an Orthodox Christian and you're Roman Catholic, but we do believe that God will have to do a lot of miracles even in this day and time because we're not cessationists like Baptists are. So I'm wondering, say one or two parties in a marriage was sterile, but they believe that there was a chance in the future God may grant them a miracle, and He would grant them a child, and they had sex in that context, under the belief that God may possibly grant them a child, like a miracle child, and I think that has happened before.
Right.
In that case, would that be immoral?
Let me ask a clarifying question. Are they striving after that procreative unity, or are they just okay? Then that would not be immoral.
Okay.
Because that's what I was arguing before. If they're striving after that procreative unity, then there's no immorality. But if they were just trying to have like selfish intercourse to justify like deriving sexual pleasure from one another solely, then yes, there would be sin.
Another thing I have a question for is that the Song of Solomon has a lot of reference to King Solomon and his wife having sex. Does not always seem like to be in the context of procreation. How would you respond to that?
Well, I would say that Solomon in Song of Solomon is still striving after that procreative unity. The thing with procreative unity is it's not that you have to explicitly say this act we are engaging in will create a child, but there has to be that openness to life. If there's not that openness to life, that's what makes it immoral. If Solomon was just trying to have essentially contraceptive sex, right? Then that's what would be immoral.
Okay, so what you're saying is that, and I think I've heard many other Catholics say this, to where having a child does not necessarily have to be fully on their mind, but they have to be open to it. They can't stop it.
Yes.
Okay, so
yes.
What you're saying is that a couple can have a marriage for the sanctity of love, so as long as they're not trying to stop a child from being created, correct?
Yes, and I think reflecting upon that element more, I would actually kind of alter what I told Danny a little bit during the debate, where like a menopausal couple, if they were still having sex after menopause with the openness to life, then I would say it's not immoral. I think that's actually a necessary clarification. I would say that if they had sex and they said, hey, we're open to life being generated from this, and like we're not gonna, like seek an abortion or what have you, then there would be no immorality there. It's only what I was trying to get at, I think, during our debate was if they're like, nope, we want to have sterile sex, no openness to life or what have you, that orientation of their heart is what's sinful or immoral.
Yeah, and to be frank, even in my partisan LARPer phase, that's even what I believed as well. But yeah, if I have any more questions regarding this, I don't want to take up other people's time. I'll just shoot you a DM. My name on Twitter is Tomo Groiper. So if I have
Awesome.
any other questions, I will send you a DM. But have
Sounds
a good
good.
night. Stay safe. Don't let the tiny hat ton people rape you in the ass.
Okay. All right.
If I could I comment on what you said?
Oh yeah, for sure, Danny. Go right ahead.
So you're saying fine, they might not strive for procreation, but so long as they're open to procreation, openness to the possibility.
Yes.
Then, okay.
Yes.
So,
sorry. So I should have clarified that more in the debate. My apologies for that. If they're open to that procreative aspect, then I would say it's not immoral.
All right. So let's suppose a homosexual couple finds out about some technology that might, right? Let's say it's 500 years from now, that might allow for homosexual pregnancies, and they're open to life then, right? Now, they might think it's probably still physically impossible, like it's impossible for a menopausal woman to have a child. Would you say that them having relations, so long as they're open to life, the homosexual couple? Because it seems like that's going to be a counterexample to your criteria.
No, because in the case of that homosexual couple, they're introducing something artificial to generate life, in the sense that it doesn't belong to their nature of being a man and a man or a woman and a woman to generate life. Whereas with a man and a woman in the confines of marriage, their biology is set up in such a way that it gives itself to the generation of life naturally. Now, one might try to counter that with saying, okay, if a straight couple uses some technology to like aid in fertility or what have you, is that sinful or wrong? I would say no, so long as it's not something like IVF, where you're essentially taking away from the natural act of conception that can only happen occurring from nature between a man and a woman.
All right, there's a lot to talk about there, but we'll proceed. Thanks for letting me respond to that. Yeah,
of course, buddy. Who is up next? I see two people.
You pick me.
Sure. What's up, Pooper Scooper?
Poper Scoper.
Poper Scoper. Okay, Poper Scoper. Let's go. What's up, buddy?
But Danny, I was just like, I wasn't here for the debate, so like, what's your sexual ethics, basically? Probably sexual revolution.
You need to rewatch it and come with a question, because we don't have time for
Well, I'm the main character, little bro.
I would agree with Danny on that. Like, if it's something about the debate, you got to go back and rewatch it. Let's see, Frankie, what's up?
All right. Hey, my name is Frankie. They call me Miss Frankie if you're nasty. My question is I feel like homosexuality is almost a little bit of a phase, especially a lot of women go through that and end up being wonderful parents and wonderful wives. Danny, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think?
I'm so sorry. I got distracted with the super chat. Can you repeat your question? That was my bad.
Yeah. I guess for Pine and Danny, I personally think homosexuality is a phase in someone's life, because there's women out there that do homosexual acts and then later they become great wives and great mothers. Do you feel like homosexuality is more a phase?
I'm fine to say that for some people, homosexuality is a phase, but I also think for some people, heterosexuality is a phase.
It's unnatural.
Well, I'm not debating you today, but maybe some other time.
Word.
But yeah, I mean, I would say that, because I was the question for both of us.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Just want to clarify. I would say that, we see the prevalence of homosexuality within modern society. And ironically, Michel Foucault talked about this in his book, History of Sexuality, where kind of when we get to like the Victorian era, we start to see this idea put forth that homosexuality is like an orientation, or it's like a lifestyle, or it like more belongs to like the totality of who someone is. Whereas in the past, one might be called like a sodomite, or they might be identified as like similar to, it was identified as kind of a crime akin to how one might identify someone as like a murderer, but you wouldn't then say like being a murderer is like an identity, right? And so I think in that way, the sort of prevalence of homosexuality, especially amongst Gen Z and millennials, has followed that track. It's been promoted amongst our generation. You know, TikTok algorithms, kind of cultural influences to be a homosexual, and so that's why it's more popular. R5, let's go.
All right, Danny, do you want to address that super chat?
Oh yeah, super chat.
Oh, the super chat. I didn't disprove PINESAP. Well, if you might think that, but I did try. I don't see what's wrong with my argument. PINESAP tried to respond to it. Maybe I don't think he succeeded, but maybe you did. But I tried to give a reductio ad absurdum that if you were to accept PINESAP's moral theory, you're going to be committed to things like sterile people are doing something immoral when they have sex, when it's not for mere sensation, and if it's not, they're not striving for what was it, procreation. Right now, PINESAP amended a bit of his view, right? So there's more to talk about there, but that's, you know, the whole approach was some kind of reductio ad absurdum.
Oh, I didn't realize it was Red 5, dude. Red 5, what's up, buddy?
Yo, what's up? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I sure can.
So this is something I think both of you guys did a very good job. Just to, I guess, preface, I am a Catholic. I agree with the arguments PINESAP put forward, but I think there is an angle, or I guess maybe a wordage that might have been useful for the debate, which is measurement. And I think arithmetic is sort of a good analogy here, in the sense that I think, Danny, the moral particularism falls short because there is no measurement that you could hold it up to. And the analogy that I'm using with arithmetic, in the sense, is that, you know, we have these mathematical truths or rules, such that, you know, 2 + 2 = 4, or, you know, the interior angle of a circle is 360 degrees, or so on and so forth. And the sense that these are universal truths that not only can they not be disproven, they have to be adhered to by everybody in order to have a correct, you know, framework, whether you're doing physics or biology. I mean, mathematics is fundamental to sort of every science. And I think that ideology carries over exactly to morals and ethics, in the sense that there has to be a universal measurement in which things can uphold to. And I guess my question is, why is something like mathematics not applicable to not mathematics, sorry. Like, why is that universal measurement not applicable to morals and ethics in the same way that it is to arithmetic and mathematics? And just briefly, to, I guess, maybe a counter argument, you might say, oh, well, arithmetic is like tangible, in the sense that, you know, we have objects, you know, we have 5 fingers in that sort of sense. But also, from like a tangible scientific perspective, those numbers aren't really real, in the sense that, like, you could build a triangle, or you could draw a triangle on a paper, but that is not the true form of a triangle, similar to like the Platonic idea of like the forms. You know, like, a real triangle only exists in the mind, in the same sense that like true goodness is sort of like a mental concept. So I think that universality of like measurement is something that ought to be applied, and is really there, when it comes to morals and ethics. And I just think moral particularism, or moral relativism for that matter, it ultimately falls flat on its face, because it can't escape that reality. So that's just my 2 cents.
All right. Was there a question?
I guess my question is, how do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile the fact that there is no sort of universality to morality, in the same way? Like, imagine you applied that to science and mathematics. If there was no universal truth behind the statement of 2 + 2 = 4, you know, mathematics and all of science would fall apart. because there is no foundation. And I think that's what PINESAP was trying to get at, is that the foundation is essential to understanding and to also like proper action in the world or action in general. So how do you reconcile that? How can there be a universality when it comes to something mental like arithmetic or geometry, but there can't be a universality when it comes to something like morality or ethics?
I think, if I'm understanding your question, I think that people gravitate towards mathematics and logic because it's in the clouds. It's detached from experience. It's like its own little world of universal principles. But for me, this is not our experience. Our experience is faced with all sorts of untidy factors and delicate natures, and there's just too much going on, right? It's unlike math in that it's not in the clouds. So if you want to, you mentioned Plato, right? There's the world of forms, there's the world of math, there's the world of that, the ideal, right? And then there's our untidy experience, right? And morality belongs in experience, on my view, right? And if it belongs in experience, it's very untidy.
All right, thank you. That was just my my thoughts. But good debate, guys. Good debate.
Awesome. JP, how are we on time, brother?
That is a good question. We have about 5 more minutes.
Oh, sick. Yeah, we bring
for
up more
questions,
people,
but
super chat.
technically not really, because remember, it was supposed to be 20 minutes and I added to 25. So we can
okay.
wrap up because it's been 20 minutes.
Danny, do you want to keep going with Q&A,
wait.
or do you want to wrap it up there?
I'm good to go if you are.
Well,
I'm good to go, honestly, too.
Okay.
Well, Bob, do you have a question? That's, oh my gosh, another person. What is wrong with you people? Oh, look, you guys have 5 minutes to spit out your question, man. So make it quick. Wait.
When we said keep going, what did we just me and PINESAP chatting or taking questions? Sorry.
No, questions, because you had
Okay.
5 more minutes. So, but if Bob and Noah don't ask a question, well, then I guess
I do have a question. Wait, can you hear me?
Yes, who's speaking? Noah or
Yeah,
Bob?
yeah. Noah. Sorry, I'm back. I had to grab something for my English paper.
Sorry, Bob, but unfortunately, your stuff isn't working. Go ahead. You'll be the last person.
I wanted to ask a question when it comes. Now, I'm someone who personally has autism, and I know, at least compared to other groups, autism has a higher
Your connection is messing up, brother.
number of people that identify as part of the LGBTQ.
No, I'm sorry. Your connection is messing up.
Here, let me see. My fault.
Noah, maybe shut off your camera, as you're really messing up.
Let me see if I can.
All right. Well, I guess that's it. All right. Well, then I guess let's just go to 5 minutes closings. I think it's time. Somebody asked a question in the private chat. My question is, how does Danny give an account for the existence of morality at all? All he believes is in his own preference, lacks any actual obligations.
Well, I don't see why my values wouldn't give me obligations, right? Number one. And I don't know what value would be independent of a mind, right? It's sort of like saying that there's pain but not had by anyone. What is that even supposed to mean, right? And this is what, in part, why I sympathize with metaethical theories that include God, is because in part I get it, right? They understand value in terms of a subject, of a mind, right? I think it makes more sense than the moral non-naturalists who want to say that value is independent of any mind, including the mind of God. So, my values, of course, are definitionally more important to me than any other values. If God had a value, then, it might be that God and I agree. If God valued, not that this wouldn't be the Catholic God, I hope, right? But if there was a God that valued, cannibalism, I would be like, screw you, right? And I'm going to do what I want. Now, he might force me to do stuff, and at that point, I'm not really responsible for what I do. But yeah, that's the brief.
Well, thank you for that, Danny. I'm cutting you off because I'm super biased and you're an atheist, and I want PINESAP to win. I'm kidding.
Okay.
I'm kidding. Me and Danny go way back. We've been friends for like 5 years now.
Oh, of
So,
course.
yeah. Right, Danny? 5 years?
It's been a long while. Oh, yeah, we're
That's a
hitting the
long
5th year.
time. Dang.
Yeah, man. That's it. Time
I
flies.
met someone that said they were with Dory Love. It was crazy. That was yesterday.
Wait, with Dory Love recently?
Yesterday, yeah. It's crazy.
So he's back in Canada?
We'll talk about it later.
Okay, cool. All right. It is 10:04. So PINESAP, Danny, do you guys want to proceed with your closing statements? 5 minutes each.
Yeah,
Do
absolutely.
you want to do since you went first, you go last, right?
Absolutely. Danny, if you'd like to go first, honestly, this time, if you'd prefer that, I can also go first too. Totally fine either way.
You're fine either way.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go first. Since you went first, I'll go first, and then that way you have the last word. All
right.
So
hold on. Let me get PINESAP out of here, and let me get myself out of here. I'm assuming you're not going to use the whole 5 minutes, so I'll just
probably not.
Okay, I'll stick around.
I sometimes don't even know what I'm going to say, but it just happens, right? But so it looks like the basis for this sort of disorder is a teleological view, where look, hey, humans have these things, functions, telos, purposes. They're not reducible to science, right? They're created by God, and some there are people that think that they exist independent of God too, by the way. But the idea is that they sort of mandate our obligations, right? If you have the telos to procreate, then they mandate certain actions or establish certain actions about right and wrong in the context of sexuality, right? So specifically, if the telos is procreation, okay, and if you don't strive for that telos, that's what PINESAP originally said, then if you don't strive for that telos, then you're doing something wrong in the domain of sexual ethics. And I think that leads to some absurd conclusions. And I think the best example of that is the menopausal, sterile couple, heterosexual couple, right? I don't think they're doing anything wrong if they want to have sexual relations in a loving, respectful way, and yet they're not striving for telos. Now, later on in the Q&A, PINESAP wanted to include that, well, they have to be open to it, as if like, there's an impossibility, but they're like, there might be a possibility. And if might be a possibility, maybe supernatural intervention or something like that, they would have to be open to that. And then that makes the action right or wrong. It neutralizes the wrong action. But as I brought up that, well, it looks like a homosexual couple, maybe rationally or irrationally, don't matter, might think that there's a possibility that they could get pregnant, a homosexual couple. It might be because, they read a scientific journal and they're talking about something like that and they or it might be irrational reasons. It doesn't matter. That fits the criteria. Now he mentioned that, well, what if if there's some kind of artificial intervention, then it's going to violate the principle. Another amendment seems to be another amendment to the kind of theory that he has. Fair enough. But then what if a menopausal woman found out that there was going to be an artificial way of reversing menopause through a machine, right? And they were open to that, right? Would they be then wrong? It's just hard for me in general to see exactly the asymmetry here. And so I'm not a big fan of this moral theory and if it's not a very good theory, and if it's the theory that's required to make sense of the disorder within homosexuality, then I think people can safely reject it. And, I think you're back to square one and looking for why we would think that we should prevent or discourage homosexual relationships. Thanks for having me, JP.
You have another minute and 30. Are you sure?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right. Let me get you out of here. Mr. PINESAP, you have 5 minutes. Let me stop this, reset it, and start it whenever you're ready.
Fantastic. Thank you, JP. So what I would say is that I think I sufficiently defended the thesis that the nature of sex is between a man and a woman within the bond of marriage that is headed for that procreative unity. Whether there is an openness to life, as I forgot to kind of add in the beginning, but later amended, whether there is that openness to life or there is that striving for that procreative unity. So long as there's the presence of the openness to life between that couple, there is a moral act of sex. Where sex becomes immoral is when it is done selfishly and it is done without that openness to life. Regarding a homosexual couple, there can never be that possibility of openness to life within the natural creation of a man and a woman and a woman. And so when Danny brought up the example of sort of the artificial technology that could be used to maybe create life in a homosexual couple, the issue there is that in the nature of a homosexual relationship, there is not the capacity for procreation belonging to the biology of both the people involved. A man cannot have a baby with a man, and a woman cannot have a baby with a woman. And in his example that he cited, it would require some kind of artificial intervention that would contradict the nature of that relationship. Whereas between a normal couple, between a man and a woman, if there was medical intervention that was ethical, so not like IVF or what have you, but maybe a surgery or what have you that still maintained the natural integrity of the biology of the man and the woman, it is merely allowing that man and that woman to carry out the nature they were made for, which is that procreative unity. Essentially, what I'm getting at is procreative unity belongs to the inherent soul, the inherent nature of a relationship between a man and a woman, whereas it does not belong to the nature of a homosexual relationship, hence why homosexuality is disordered. That being said, I would love to thank Danny for his charity, for being just an upstanding guy this entire debate. He completely wowed me with how professional he was and how kind he was. And I think this was I wouldn't even say this was a debate. I'd say this was a fruitful discussion. And I want to thank you too, JP, for having me on. I think this was very fruitful for everyone watching. And this was a very wonderful experience for myself. I had a great time.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for having me again, JP.
All right, fellas. Thank you.
Coming from the heavens.
So now, real quick, where can they find you, PINESAP? Do you have a YouTube channel, a Twitter account? Where can people find you?
Yes, sir, I do. So my Twitter account is FeelsGuy2003, and my YouTube is just if you type in PINESAP. I'm also on Rumble as well.
All right, cool. I don't want any Christians following Danny, so we're gonna skip his part.
I'm fine with that.
Not Danny. What is it?
I don't want them to melt, right? When they watch my videos. So.
No. It's Danny's at Phil Talk, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter. Phil Talk. What is Phil Talk? What does that even mean?
Philosophy talk.
Wow. I'm just finding that out, bro.
That's crazy after 5 years.
Yo, Phil Talk. I'm like, yo, is this a name like Phil? Danny Phil? Like, yo, that's crazy, man. No one's ever called philosophy Phil for short. Hey, you want to talk some Phil, bro?
In philosophy courses, what's the abbreviation?
Oh, Phil 101 or something like that?
Oh, yeah. I'd never considered that before.
All right, well, you learn something new every day. All right. Some people are in the comment sections. They still want to have discussions. Fortunately, this concludes this debate. Maybe next time you guys can maybe join Danny on one of his panels or PINESAP if you guys have anything to say to these fellas. But this concludes this debate. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, PINESAP. I am going to call you Danny because what you told me was very intriguing about the Dore thing. But call you guys back. God bless you, PINESAP. Thank you for coming. Danny, God bless you. All right, so that's the end of this debate. It was a good one. I enjoyed